Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Venture Fuel Visionaries podcast. I'm your host, Fred Schonenberg. On today's show, we have Maria Rodriguez. Maria is the executive director of the Valiente Fund. It is a donor and funder collaborative established to ensure the long-term scale of resources is reimagined to support a thriving infrastructure that meets the many diverse Latin communities. They are addressing the lack of investment of philanthropic funds for Latine leaders, organizations, and communities. They just launched the Valiente Accelerator, which is a peer cohort with one-year grants as well as general support to strengthen operational capacities such as finance, human resources, data systems project, as well as organizational management. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things in a quick amount of time today, everything from social entrepreneurship to venture philanthropy or philanthropic innovation as movement architectures, as well as the opportunity for Latines who represent the largest growing demographic in our country. Nearly 60 million people identify as Latine or have Hispanic roots, which accounts for approximately 18% of the total US population. Yet less than 2% of US philanthropic dollars are directly invested in Latine organizations. So, all that said, please join me in welcoming Maria Rodriguez. Maria, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Of course, Fred. Thank you. Thanks for the invite and thanks for your work.
So can you tell us a bit about your background and what led you to the Valiente Fund?
Sure. I grew up in Puerto Rico, La Isla del Encanto, with a multicultural, multi-ethnic family and very values-based. I was able to get to DC, where I had amazing experiences, both connecting with the anti-apartheid movement that led me to understand systemic racism, and also with all the Latinos in DC. I was like, where are these people from? El Salvador. And at a young age, I was an interpreter for human rights delegations to El Salvador. That really gave me really deep perspectives, both around U.S. foreign policy, but then the cost to domestic policy. And so I started doing domestic work. That led me to Florida. And for the last 15 years previous to this role, I was serving the members of the Florida Immigrant Coalition. So lots of stories to tell, being in the battleground of the battleground.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I thought was interesting as we did research was your social entrepreneur background, that you've co-founded half a dozen award-winning organizations that are still thriving today. What drew you to social entrepreneurship, and can you tell us a little bit about some of those organizations?
Well, that appetite moving from charity to justice, that appetite of trying to address challenges and opportunities. In the DC area, one of the first projects, I would cross the Potomac from college to support tenant organizing, and that culminated in one of the largest limited equity housing cooperative that was a Black-brown tenancy. And so it was beautiful to see people be able to have stable housing, and that we actually literally changed the map. That was a very ambitious project. John Liss and the folks at the Tenants and Workers United were the ones who really led that, and I worked with them on and off for over a decade in many different ways. So that was a formative experience. I was brought to South Florida to help set up a free clinic. It was a test to test physician volunteerism by Robert Wood Johnson in collaboration with the Baptist Health Systems. And again, like from the bottom up, creating systems and collaborations between academia and community and philanthropy to address the healthcare crisis at the time. And then I landed when the xenophobia wave really started taking ground right before Sensenbrenner. I landed. I had been supporting, and I was asked to become the executive director of the Florida Immigrant Coalition. It had previously existed, but we brought it into incorporation into a new phase. And through the Florida Immigrant Coalition, we built numerous organizations together with many other partners. It's a false paradigm that you do it alone. You always have a team and partners, but the Florida Immigrant Coalition was a partner in building United We Dream, which is a Dreamer Nation organization at the time, and now building the Black Immigrant Network, which was a project of the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, building the Office of New American, a public-private partnership, building the New Florida Majority, which now is Florida Rising, and the Florida for All. I can go on. So lots of diverse projects that require different structures and partners, but all aligned towards creating a more inclusive, a true democracy for all.
I love that. So maybe that's a good segue into today. So can you tell us about the Valiente Fund and maybe specifically the problem you're solving and your mission?
Yes, so I have the privilege of coming on board in June as the first executive director of the Valiente Fund. Valiente was founded by philanthropists who recognized the fact that we were not matching our power in leadership or impact, partly because we were, as you said at the beginning of the interview, receiving less than 2% of philanthropic dollars. So Valiente understands that Latinos, we are very many, as you said, we are young and we are growing. We have diversity and we're leading on many different sectors and fronts. The opportunity is that we build unity and power towards those changes that I mentioned that reflect our progressive values. And honestly, the challenge is that we allow the status threat attacks. That's something we talk at the organization where Valiente is housed, Way to Win and Way to Rise. We talk about the status attacks, which essentially are the xenophobia and anti-Blackness rhetoric that is inserted into our communities in a very divisive and intentional way so that we weaken our unity efforts towards a multiracial democracy. So Latinas are a growing demographic, whether you consider that an electoral power base or a consumer market base. As I said earlier, younger, and the culture footprint is large, but yet our communities are not reaching the governing power and not contesting in the way that we could for even state-based power. And it goes beyond representation. It goes to making the changes that we know are aligned with our cultural values and fighting, to be honest, these times that are so tough right now, whether you consider them being neo-fascist times or neo-Confederate times or just, post-pandemic insecurity times. It's a moment where we can and should consolidate the power of our communities so that we can create the quality of life that we deserve.
Can you tell us about the Valiente Accelerator?
Sure. So the Valiente is actually many things. It's a micro ecosystem. So it's both a grant maker on the C3 side. It's a grant maker on the C4 side. Valiente is Valiente Fund. Valiente Action Fund is a C4. We also have an accelerator, and we're also a collaborative fund where we bring and pull monies together. So the accelerator essentially, it seeks to bring capacity, capital plus capacity. It's the typical model of the accelerator that you see in business in many ways. We launched our first accelerator. We opted to do an operational accelerator to support the foundation of many of these organizations so that they could feel solid and confident to grow and to do management of multi-entities. And so it includes a grant for the operational accelerator. It's $100,000, and then 7 months of convenings, coaching, and online trainings. We're also on the eve of launching a second accelerator. This one is for communicators and narrative, and that will grow the voice of many of the local journalists. We just saw the LA Times cut the Los team, and so we know the shifting in that industry. So we want to shore up the local storytellers. So those are a couple examples of the accelerators, but we're looking forward to continuing maybe a data and technology accelerator, and for sure a membership an audience building accelerator so that our organizations are really rooted in the diverse communities that we exist in.
I love that. So I'm curious why the accelerator model, and this is obviously our company runs accelerators for some of the largest companies in the world, and this idea of what I've heard called before, like venture philanthropy or philanthropic innovation, is something that I think is very powerful. Obviously, we see it on the business side, but curious what attracted you all to this as a model, given the focus of your organization.
Yeah, we actually did a series of interviews and research and understood that in some places we needed incubators because there wasn't the entities that reflected the demographic growth or the power base. In other places, there were fledgling organizations, but that they were in the 3 to 5 year mark, and that's a key moment where it's you flounder forward or you dissipate, and so that's the sweet spot. Like I said earlier, these are critical moments, and critical moments require innovation. And so, in many ways, we're trying to leapfrog to the next iteration of what these social movements could look like, what these organizations could aspire to. We're hoping to encourage, like I said earlier, scale and growth, but also boldness. The only other thing I would say is that as we're thinking about the fabric of our communities and our societies, we're thinking about the consciousness of leaders, the capacity of organizations, and the connectivity of movements. And that aspect of connectivity is really key to building the ecosystems that are important to be able to engage the diversity of our communities.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered that question, Fred, but
no, beautifully. I mean, it's so funny. I was taking down notes because we've interviewed all different models of accelerators and different people thinking of different things. And I mean, the microecosystems, the idea of the sort of moments of critical moments require innovation, and like how do you leapfrog? And this moment of that. There's the incubation of like, hey, there's ideas that need to figure out how to get off the ground. But then there's great ideas that maybe are at that stage where like they've done the very grassroots piece and they've proven there's market fit of some sort, but they don't know how to scale to the next level or how to get the larger grants or how to build the movement beyond their core circle. So a lot of the things you're talking about is very core to any type of accelerator. And I think is the ability of convening people at a similar stage to share best practices, and that cohort approach is really, really interesting in this case. So you answered it perfectly.
Peer learning is so powerful because nothing like experience. And it's clear that the consciousness of leaders is a basis so we can address that xenophobia and the anti-Blackness of the status threat. And then obviously the capacity of organizations, that's obvious. But the next thing where I think there's space for innovation is that connectivity of movements, the intersectionality of our identities, because we are part of the labor movement and the housing movement and the women's right and protecting freedoms and moving towards a better life. So in that area, Fred, I think there's also innovations around how do we have revenue generating entities that are part of the ecosystem? How do we create operational hubs? How do we do LLCs that can serve, be values aligned? So I think there's a lot of opportunities in building those ecosystems. And Latinos tend to be very entrepreneurial. That's a lot of the, not just immigrants, but Latinos. And so that's a lot of the energy that we also want to capture and generate.
Yeah, I know we were talking a little bit before we hit record, but I've been fortunate to be on the advisory board and a member of Angeles Investors, which is the fastest growing angel group, specifically focused on Latina and Latino founded companies. And to your point of like entrepreneurial energy, like it is so exciting. I'm actually going to their pitch night, their Q2 pitch night this week. And it is like, it's so exciting to see all the problems being solved, how they're being solved with momentum. And so I think there's a lot here, a lot of intersection, both from the philanthropy side as well as the LLC side, and revenue generating that's pretty spectacular. And there's a lot of promise there. Speaking
Yeah.
of which, can you talk a little bit about some of the organizations or startups that are within this first cohort and what you're excited about?
Yeah, we did an open call, so equal opportunity for so that we could really do some listening and really understand the landscape. Especially, I'm a new philanthropist or in this intermediary spot, so it was very important to kind of get a sense of who was out there. And we got amazing and very diverse groups. The ones that are, that I am drawn towards are folks who are directly impacted, that are addressing their experience and moving that forward. Some of it very dramatic, like a Pulse massacre survivor who saw that there wasn't an organization for queer Puerto Ricans in Central Florida, and especially after the hurricane, being able to give support in a really good landing spot so that they could get their voices heard in civic engagement. We have some young women in East Rural Texas who wanted to stay in their community, went off to college, wanted to come back, and are building a community fabric towards civic engagement and intergenerational group, but really youth led. So I find that very inspiring that they decided to stay in rural East Texas, having been able to go anywhere they wanted to, understanding the importance of their communities. There's also groups in rural North Carolina. There's a couple groups in San Antonio that are that were victims of over policing. One, her sister, and the other person, her father. So they were really looking at the questions of criminalization and over policing. So there's multiple issues, different demographics. Obviously, Central Florida with the Puerto Ricans is there's several groups there, and various groups around Texas, and then in North Carolina. There's an appetite to help folks connect with each other so that there could be a stronger fabric. We're looking forward to supporting groups in Nevada. And then with the communicators, there'll be many other states that will be engaging.
One of the things I thought was amazing as I did the research is, your call to agitate for change, and I think it's something that's really interesting. Is obviously some of the founders and the organizations you mentioned had these like lived experiences, right? There was a personal moment, and they said, I have to solve this problem. And I think a lot of times and I'm just going to read your quote because I thought it was amazing, which was like turning pain into power, turning poetry into policy to fuel us forward. And I think it's such a great call to action. What advice do you have for people maybe that are listening that are feel wronged, see an opportunity, but don't know if their voice will be, starting something can feel overwhelming or also feel like a drop in the bucket, right? There's that balance of if I do something, it's not going to make a difference, or, oh my gosh, like that's going to be so hard to do. How do you kind of help people agitate for change?
Yeah, that's a great question. I heard Cecile Richards say once, especially to women, because we carry some internalized oppression, or people of color, or whatever marginalized groups, if you're dealing with a disability. And her advice was start before you're ready. So it sounds counterintuitive, but I think for some of us, our experience is very powerful. We know systems that need to be changed, and the beauty of coming together with other people who have that same experience, it really helps you move from being a symptom or a victim of a system to really understand that you can change a system, and that you are not a object of history but a subject of history, and that in the same way that we're building this multiracial democracy, that we are having to protect at this moment with very dire implications, we are awakening people's governance muscle. And it's not just elected governance, it's governance over your body, over your home, over your school, over your workplace, your church, your union, whatever it is. So I think that coming together gives people a space to create analysis and create courage for bold action for the systemic change that we are seeking.
Yeah, I love the focus on the bold action. It's so nice. Maria, where should people go to learn more about the program and all that you're working on?
Yeah, the Valiente does have a page. It's a page where you can get our email, valiente@waytorise.org. And I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation, Fred, at different moments, bringing in some of our groups. You can see me on X at Rodriguez Maria. But yeah, I appreciate the opportunity for the chat, and thank you for the work that you've been doing it through Angeles and everywhere else.
Well, thank you, and both for your time today and all that you're doing to spark change. It's really exciting. We'll be following along and promoting everything the best that we can. So thank you for your time.
Yeah. We're inviting investors and funders to join us as we look for new ways of building power for Latine leaders, organizations, and communities. So thanks, Fred. Take
Perfect.
care.
Thank you.